All right, welcome to this high-speed explainer of Nathaniel Popper's incredible book, Digital Gold. We are going to capture the absolute essentials of this epic story in 8 minutes or less. So if you're a focused learner looking to truly grasp the origins of cryptocurrency, you are definitely in the right place. We're going to take a super fast-paced chronological journey right through the birth, the dramatic crashes, and the totally chaotic rise of Bitcoin. We'll look at the ideologues who birthed it, the scandals that nearly killed it, and the Wall Street giants who eventually embraced the whole shebang. Okay, let's dive right into this.
10,000. Back in the spring of 2010, a 28-year-old Florida software architect named Laszlo Honix had amassed a massive stockpile of 70,000 of a completely obscure digital token. And he did this by routing the mining process through his computer's graphics card, which vastly outperformed the standard processors everyone else was using at the time. Now back then, these tokens were essentially worthless, right? Just a purely theoretical experiment shared among a tiny niche group of online cryptographers. But Laszlo, being a pretty good-natured hacker, wanted to see if this code actually had any real-world utility.
And what he did brilliantly illustrates the very humble beginnings of digital finance. Laszlo literally went onto a forum and offered 10,000 of his tokens to anyone, anywhere, who would order him some food. On May 22, 2010, a user over in California actually took him up on it. They called Laszlo's local Papa John's in Jacksonville and ordered 2 fully loaded pizzas for delivery. It was the absolute first real-world Bitcoin transaction. Laszlo ate his pizza, happily proving the concept worked, and unwittingly spending a digital fund that, in the years to come, would be worth millions upon millions of dollars. Crazy, right?
Now, to understand why those pizzas were so wildly revolutionary, we really have to look at the core technological conflict laid out in Popper's book. Think about your own bank account for a second. On one side, you have traditional fiat currency. It's inherently centralized. It absolutely requires trust, Trust that the central bank isn't going to recklessly debase the currency, and trust that the financial institutions will actually process your payments. But on the other side, you have Satoshi Nakamoto's radical invention, Bitcoin. It's a completely decentralized peer-to-peer network governed entirely by open-source code. It is fundamentally trustless, meaning you don't need to trust a bank, you don't need to trust the government, you just need to trust the mathematics of the blockchain ledger. But, this idea didn't just appear out of nowhere. It actually built upon decades of earlier cryptography experiments. Back in 1997, Adam Back conceptualized Hashcash as an anti-spam mechanism. Then came ideas like Nick Szabo's BitGold, which aimed at creating digital scarcity. The whole cypherpunk community had literally been trying to create anonymous digital money for years, but they always hit the exact same roadblock. How do you prevent double spending without a central authority? Well, in 2008, perfectly timed by the way, with a catastrophic global financial crisis and massive, highly unpopular bank bailouts, the pseudonymous Satoshi Nakamoto published the Bitcoin white paper. And by January 2009, the network officially launched, quietly running in the background on the computers of a few dedicated cryptographers.
Act 2. The Wild West. So Bitcoin couldn't remain a quiet academic experiment forever. Entering its chaotic adolescence, the digital currency finally gained real-world value. But it almost immediately fell prey to hackers, black markets, and absolute Wild West opportunism. As the code proved it could actually move value outside the traditional banking system, a very different kind of user began to take notice. Which brings us to a frankly staggering number, $1.2 million. By 2012, that was the monthly transaction volume on Silk Road, an anonymous online bazaar created by a young guy named Ross Ulbricht. Because Bitcoin offered a way to transact without a credit card company or a bank flagging the purchase, it provided the perfect financial engine for this underground website. Silk Road gave Bitcoin its first massive, albeit completely illegal, use case, proving without a doubt that there was incredibly high demand for a censorship-resistant digital currency.
But beyond the black market, what's truly fascinating is the intense ideological fervor that really drove Bitcoin's early adoption. Take Roger Ver, for example, a highly successful entrepreneur who famously ended up renouncing his U.S. citizenship. To early adopters like Ver, who heavily promoted and invested in the entire ecosystem, Bitcoin wasn't just some speculative investment, it was a tool for radical global freedom. Now, we're just explaining the source material here, but it's very clear these early believers viewed the code as a profound, world-changing way to strip monetary power away from the state and hand it directly back to the individual.
But here's the catch. Taking that kind of power into your own hands comes with extreme risks. Satoshi actually designed Bitcoin so users held their own private keys, which are essentially the master digital passwords to their funds. But, well, convenience usually wins out,
and users disastrously began trusting a single unregulated centralized exchange in Tokyo called Mt. Gox to hold their money for them. And the results? Totally catastrophic. Hackers found a vulnerability and quietly, over a really long period of time, siphoned coins out of Mt. Gox's online hot wallets. The CEO, Mark Arpellis, didn't even realize they were being robbed and unwittingly just kept refilling the empty hot wallets with coins from the highly secure offline cold wallets.
And this brings us to the terrifying scale of what happened next. In early 2014, Mt. Gox completely collapsed. Roughly 650,000 customer coins simply vanished into the ether. At the time, that was worth about $400 million. Just poof, gone. It was a massive black eye for the entire community. It proved that while the decentralized Bitcoin protocol itself hadn't been hacked, the centralized businesses built on top of it were incredibly vulnerable. Actually, at the time, many critics flat out declared that this was the definitive end of the grand Bitcoin experiment.
Act 3. The Mainstream Clash.
Well, those critics who declared the end of the grand Bitcoin experiment, they were wrong. Despite the drug scandals and that massive Mt. Gox collapse, a new realization was dawning. Silicon Valley venture capitalists and Wall Street giants finally started looking past the sensational headlines. They looked at the underlying blockchain technology and realized, wait a minute, this has the genuine potential to disrupt global finance in a massive way. Why? Because Bitcoin was actually solving real, urgent problems around the globe. Down in Argentina, regular citizens started using it to preserve their wealth against crippling hyperinflation. Over in China, tech-savvy users utilized Bitcoin to literally dodge the government's strict capital controls and move their money freely. And globally, smart entrepreneurs realized that this network could drastically undercut the exorbitant fees charged by traditional international remittance companies like Western Union. These highly practical, everyday use cases are what really pushed Bitcoin adoption far beyond the black market and squarely into the global mainstream consciousness.
And the traditional tech world, they were secretly taking notes the whole time. Osama Ebidir, who was the head of Google's payments division working on Google Wallet, was actually given a tutorial on Bitcoin's frictionless, decentralized architecture. His response? I would never admit it outside this room, but this is how payments probably should work. This kind of secret validation eventually culminated in figures like Wences Casares, this incredibly persuasive entrepreneur, literally pitching Bitcoin to tech billionaires like Bill Gates and huge Wall Street titans at the exclusive Allen & Company retreat. The establishment was officially intrigued.
And naturally, as that institutional interest grew, the price went absolutely parabolic. I mean, from fractions of a penny back in 2010, the asset rocketed to a then staggering $32 in 2011, going all the way to cresting $1,000 in 2013. These chaotic, highly speculative price explosions drew in a wild mix of people, from those die-hard libertarian true believers to massive calculating institutional hedge funds like Fortress Investment Group. Suddenly, absolutely everyone wanted a piece of the digital gold rush.
But here's the kicker. This massive price volatility highlighted a really deep philosophical conflict. Satoshi Nakamoto built Bitcoin because, as he wrote, the history of fiat currencies is full of breaches of that trust. He wanted a stable, mathematically guaranteed money supply. However, prominent economists like Nobel laureate Paul Krugman pointed to the wild charts and asked a very valid question. How can a violently volatile, deflationary asset ever truly act as a functional, everyday currency? Think about it. If you honestly think your Bitcoin will be worth way more tomorrow, why on earth would you spend it on a pizza today? You wouldn't. You'd hoard it.
So, what does this all mean? That question brings us to the ultimate tension at the very heart of this incredible history. As we look at the legacy mapped out in digital gold, we are left balancing right on an edge. Will Bitcoin ultimately fulfill that original cypherpunk dream and actually replace traditional centralized fiat money as a global medium of exchange? Or is its destiny to simply remain a highly volatile, speculative, and decentralized form of digital gold? The source material leaves us wrestling right there with that very question.
If you enjoyed this, subscribe to In 8 Minutes and never miss what matters.